about the carbon cycle. I'm Mahika. Oh, okay. So what is carbon? It's an element and it has six neutrons and six protons. It's the basis of life of Earth, and it is found in all Earth systems. So the carbon atoms are used repeatedly on Earth, and they cycle between the hydrosphere, biosphere, geosphere, and atmosphere. And this is the carbon cycle diagram. So the carbon in the atmosphere goes to the plants, which use it to make food, and then the animals eat it, and the plants take in that carbon, and then they die. The plants and animals, and their bodies don't really get decomposed, but after many years, they become part of like the oil and all that. And then also, carbon slowly is released from these substances that return to the atmosphere. So, like, decomposers break down dead things and release carbon to the atmosphere and soil. And these fossil fuels are burned and then it's returned back into the atmosphere. So, the chemical reactions are respiration, photosynthesis, combustion, consumption, decomposition, and there's basically between the ocean and the atmosphere, it dissolves and vaporizes, and then there's also weathering, which is basically the rocks breaking down and releasing carbon. So the organisms eat and take in the carbon, and some of it becomes part of their bodies. And when they breathe and respirate, they release carbon. So plants consume carbon dioxide from the hydrosphere or the atmosphere to make food, and they release carbon by respiration. So carbon dioxide and the human impact. Fossil fuels release carbon. The carbon stores and builds up into the atmosphere. When humans burn the fossil fuels, it releases lots of carbon into the atmosphere, which is really bad. And an increase in the carbon dioxide leads to global warming. And the fewer plants there are means there's less carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. When plants and animals die, so their bodies are then decomposed and the carbon atoms are returned to the atmosphere. Some are not fully decomposed and end up in the geosphere deposits or at the bottom of the ocean. What is the carbon footprint? So, the amount of carbon released into the atmosphere by our personal day to day activities. It could depend on the type of car you drive, how far you drive your car. Usually, bigger cars have like bigger engines, so that uses more fuel. And the electricity that you use at home contributes to like 12% towards the total output of carbon emissions in that environment. And using in the appliances such as like the microwave, dishwasher, and light bulbs and all that. So, how can you reduce your carbon footprint? You can buy from your local farmers market. You can recycle, unplug your appliances when you're not using them. You could ride a bike instead of using your car, and turn off the water taps when you're not using them.
Hey, describe how the oceans help to regulate the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So, how the oceans help to regulate the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is their temperatures. Temperature of the ocean helps because carbon dioxide is released or absorbed into the water. Carbon dioxide mainly can be dissolved into cold water. Through photosynthesis and by plant-like organisms, the ocean takes up carbon dioxide. When fossil fuels are being burned and atmospheric carbon dioxide levels go up, the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide to stay in balance. Half of the carbon dioxide released into the air by humans each year is absorbed by the oceans. Since the ocean absorbs much of the carbon dioxide that is released from the burning of fossil fuels, The extra carbon dioxide lowers the ocean's pH through a process known as ocean acidification.
Okay, I'm Melissa, and so the way carbon compounds naturally enter and leave the atmosphere through abiotic activity is that the abiotic factor, which is the carbon dioxide, helps create the biotic factor, which is the carbohydrate-based plants. Carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere when cellular respiration begins in the body, and then the cycle repeats. Nutrients in the biogeochemical processes travel through the ecosystem. A biogeochemical cycle is a circuit/path that moves a chemical element through the biotic and abiotic factors of an ecosystem. To conclude, the carbon cycle includes carbon exchange between living organisms and their environments, which is the abiotic factor. In the carbon cycle, carbon is regularly removed from the environment and returned to it.
I'm Alex, and oceans help in regulate carbon dioxide. So the mixed layer in the diagram is on the right side of the diagram, and it is where the carbon dioxide is absorbed. The turbulence, which is in the middle of the diagram, keeps the water moving near the surface, which maintains the mixed layer. Over time, in the mixed layers, the carbon dioxide slowly enters the deeper part of the ocean in regions of cold, salty waters, for example, the North and South Poles. Carbon cycle through geological activity. One way carbon enters the atmosphere is from organisms when they exhale and when they die, releasing CO2. Fossil fuels, when burnt, also release carbon into the atmosphere. Carbon is removed from the atmosphere by photosynthesis, which replaces it with oxygen. And here is a carbon cycle summary and video.
What is the carbon cycle? Carbon is the chemical backbone of all life on Earth. All of the carbon we currently have on Earth is the same amount we have always had. When new life is formed, carbon forms key molecules like protein and DNA. It's also found in our atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, or CO2. The carbon cycle is nature's way of reusing carbon atoms, which travel from the atmosphere into organisms in the Earth and then back into the atmosphere, over and over again. Most carbon is stored in rocks and sediments, while the rest is stored in the ocean, atmosphere, and living organisms. These are the reservoirs or sinks through which carbon cycles. The ocean is a giant carbon sink that absorbs carbon. Marine organisms, from marsh plants to fish, from seaweed to birds, also produce carbon through living and dying. Sometimes dead organisms become fossil fuels that go through combustion, giving off CO2, and the cycle continues.